Hello and welcome everybody to a special episode of Voices of Black Folk. Today I have two magnificent individuals, Brian Kennedy and Mr. Reginald McCrimmon. And so at this time I would just like to give my guests an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are. Reggie, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Will. I appreciate you having me. Good to see you. You didn't have to use my entire government name, but it'll go. I'm Reggie McCrimmon. I guess right now, I guess we're connected because we went to NCCU together. We're fraternity brothers as well, and just really good friends. And so that's the most important thing that connects us. Also spent some time in Congress, as well as spent some time as a consultant in working with a lot of mainly tech companies, but also financial services as well. And then now spending some time in-house within a government relations shop as we continue to track elections day to day, as that's, the number one thing that many GR shops focused on federal affairs or federal government are focused on. So good to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity. And that's my life in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Brian?
Hey, y'all. I'm Brian Kennedy. Y'all know me because we went to school together. Fraternity brothers and all that good stuff. My background, my master's is in policy. And so my background is in public policy analysis, some advocacy works, mostly at the state level, a little bit of federal work. And so actually I started my career in policy at the beginning of the Trump administration and left recently to start doing consulting work, working with nonprofits and foundations. And so happy anytime that there's an opportunity to jump back into the policy space and to work on my policy muscle just a little bit. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. So first and foremost, I just want to say this week might easily be one of the longest weeks in history. In our lifetime, we've never seen an election like this. We've never had to wait 4 days until projected winner is called. And so my first question is, what were your thoughts when you when that CNN projection finally came out that Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris had been declared the winners of this election? Can you talk a little bit about what was going on through your mind? Like, what questions did you have? What things were you just really thinking about? Anybody feel free to
I'll start. So, I mean, I think one of the things I learned, I remember watching you're right in that this was a very different election, right? I remember watching the, 2016 results come in, and, it became pretty clear pretty early which way which direction they were going. I don't think and I may be wrong, I don't think a projected winner was called until late that night. So probably, closer to midnight or after midnight of election day. And so I think, one thing that was interesting, I think that the media, most media networks, you could hear it in the rhetoric. They were talking about the validity of the process, and they're definitely putting an overemphasis on how, secure and safe the voting process was and how everything was going according to plan. And so I think that, while it was definitely like an overall theme of kind of like everybody holding their breath and this idea that it was an extremely close race, the reality is that Biden won by 4.1 million votes and counting. And so, in one sense, it was close in that there were some key important electoral college votes that came down are coming down to a matter of tens of thousands of votes, which is, very close in an election where 150 million people are voting. But at the same time, and I think, someone put it really well, Biden was never behind. The only reason why he looked like he came from behind in Pennsylvania was because the mail-in ballots weren't allowed to be counted early because of a decision by the state legislative body. So I think in one sense, there was definitely a feeling of anxiousness and, and anticipation, and of course, like, relief when the projected winner was called. In another sense, I think I think it'll be important in reflecting on this to remember that, like, it was a clear win. It wasn't, although, they have to cover something, so they're going to spend time on that board pressing buttons and whatnot. But like, the win was clear. If Fox News was the first place to call Arizona, so it was certainly exciting. It was a relief. But I think one thing I'm going to try to remember moving forward is that it was decisive.
Reggie?
Yeah, I was predicting from the start that that Biden would win the popular vote, and that it would come down to a couple of votes in particular states for the Electoral College, right? I would say for me, my initial feeling, like I went to a boxing class yesterday when I knew the results were going to come in, and I just wanted to spend some time, like, doing something that would take my mind completely off of what was happening, because the result for me was going to be the same, or at least the work moving forward is going to be the same. And I was, really thinking about that more than I was about the outcome. When the results came in on, what was it, Tuesday now? That we've been tracking this. When the results came in on Tuesday, I just kind of felt like, okay, this could go either way. The fact that it's this close is a message in itself to people who are, activists or political consultants or advisors or anything, right? Like, to see it that close, and it wasn't close in regards to popular vote, but I'm just saying the fact that we had to wait this long and that there has been the attention that it has been on, what the results actually mean. It just meant to me that, all right, what's the work that needs to be done? What's my role in doing that work? What's my role in helping the company I work for get ready for what that means moving forward? And it was just more of like, I'm just listening. I'm not here to come up with anything right now, but like, I just want to listen and make the right assessment moving forward. So, this has been something in the works, I think, for 4 years. If you talk to anybody who's just been tracking this or worked campaigns or been close to this for a while, this has been 4 years in the making of trying to figure out what is next. I remember being in Wilson, North Carolina 4 years ago with my former boss, Mr. Butterfield, who was chair of the CBC at the time. And we were sitting in his office watching the results come in. And it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And essentially, before even all of the votes came in and it was absolutely confirmed, and a lot of us were still holding out hope, I think, he saw 1 or 2 states come in where he was like, this ain't going the way I think it will, and I might as well go ahead and go to sleep, and y'all wake me up when we know it for sure. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is wild, right? Like, this is not supposed to be like this. And thinking to myself, like, this is going to be a long 4 years moving forward. And so it's been 4 years in the making. So my thought process when the results came yesterday was more on all right, the last 4 years have been a roller coaster. What does it mean moving forward? Let's take some time to celebrate, but like, come Monday, what's it mean for us? What's it mean for people who are, and I'm not even talking about one side or the other, right? Like, I can definitely do that, but I'm just saying, like, for people who believe that our democracy is supposed to work a certain way, what has the last 4 years taught us, and what do we have to do to be a part of making sure it doesn't go like this, or this doesn't happen again, moving forward. And so I'm just kind of even-handed. You all know, like, meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. I didn't want to get too high on the win, and I don't like to get too low on the losses. And so just trying to stay even-handed and focus people on the work that's to come. So that's probably like the least most emotional and gloom and doom answer to this, but at least for me, I see it as that. I don't necessarily see this as like the turning point for what most Democrats think this means.
And I think Reggie, you hit on a very important question, a very important point, right? As I was watching the election, as you know, I was having conversations with friends and colleagues alike. One thing stayed synonymous is term "a nation divided." A nation divided is a term that we hear often, right? And you know, from a progressive lens or a left lens or whatever you want to call it, our current president, the current occupant of the White House, has insulted damn near everybody. He's mocked the democracy. He's taken the U.S. out of key treaties. This man has literally done everything you can think of to like bring this democracy down, but yet 70 million people and still going voted for him, right? And I think that's a little bit telling. And so I guess my next question is, you know, as somebody who identifies within the more so within the Democratic Party and is very happy for this win, is very happy to see you know, this new president coming in. What about those that didn't necessarily want this? What about those that were okay with what we've been getting for the last 4 years? Like, what in you all's opinion, and Brian, I want to start with you on this. What do you think is going through their minds today?
Yeah, I don't care. For a couple of reasons. And I don't mean that in a I mean that in the I mean that in a very genuine way. Like, so two things. One, from a policy standpoint, if I'm thinking about this as a policy analyst, as a lobbyist, as an advocate, I don't care, because I know that the progressive policies that the left has been pushing for over the past 4 years are policies that help everybody, right? So Medicaid expansion helps everyone, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or who you voted for. Removing things like public charge from our social safety net benefits everyone. Increasing the minimum wage benefits everyone. So I don't care, you know, from a policy advocate or a lobbyist perspective, I don't like it, you know, I know what policies help make people better and stronger. I know which policies create stronger economies. I know that progressive tax policy is good for everyone, including those whose taxes go up. So in one sense, I actually don't. It's not, you know, that's not the work. The work is not to get people to a point where they feel good about it. Like, nah, you got healthcare now. You're welcome. And then in the other sense, which is kind of outside of the policy space, just like as a citizen, I don't care, because if you voted for someone who, you know, identifies with white supremacists, someone who calls fine people on both sides when one side are neo-Nazis, like, if you're voting for that person, I don't care that you're upset. Like, I don't have the luxury of making allowance for your emotional state when I'm actually voting for my survival and for my child's survival. So I don't, and I know that, like, I don't care comes off very harsh, but I literally, it is not a priority of mine. It is not in my interest one way or another to care. You know, I hope that they get health coverage, and I hope that they then appreciate that health coverage and then fight for health coverage and for those same types of policies for other people. That's what I hope that they get out of this. But if you voted for Trump and Trump lost and you're upset about it, you know, I have nothing for you other than a slate of progressive policy that's going to make your life better. And so you're welcome. I don't know what else to say about that, though.
Appreciate that, Reggie.
Yeah, I agree. I would just change it a little bit and say I can't care. And I'm speaking personally, is that I personally can no longer care about trying to reach people who have just a basic fundamental disagreement on decency and compassion and caring for other people. The I have a moment here where a couple of weeks ago I was in the barbershop and I got into it with an older black man, and I had to apologize to him because I felt my grandmother say, "You better you better go apologize and respect your elders." But this black man, this older black man, was just reciting Fox News to me
Mm.
and to the entire place, and he was making claims that this president, he used the talking points. And the reason I say talking points is because as a lobbyist, I get the talking points for each party every week. Like literally coming from the majority leader, we have consultants that send you talking points from parties that they send out to the entire party for a week. And you can bet on, verbatim what they're going to say on Fox News when they go. These are the talking points when you're asked about this and this and this. And this particular individual shared each and every one of those talking points. And this was, and I could no longer just let him do that. And I had to, at that point, say, I'm not trying to reach you. Like I usually try to talk to people in a way that I can reach them and just say, you and we're not that different. We probably agree more than we disagree. But I had to take a stance and say, like, we're not going to agree and you're wrong. And the reason you're wrong is because of, and I quoted statistics and reports and I gave him sources. And I realized that it doesn't matter. Like he was a perfect example of how parties, and how the administration has just said what they want to say so that their supporters and their base just reiterate them regardless of how false that they are. And that's so dangerous. Mm-hmm. And he was a black man who owned his own small business, who said his business was doing better than it ever had done in history. And the reason it was doing better was because of the free market that, the president continues to allow him to operate in. I didn't ask him if he had employees. I didn't ask him if he offered them health care. I didn't ask them if he felt that they deserved a living wage. I didn't ask him any of the questions that would ultimately show him that Democratic policies are not the worst thing that ever happened to his life. That they actually, what is actually happening is that he is seeing the benefits of the remainder of the policies that were put in place by the Democratic Party or the Democrats that the Republicans continue to build off of and ultimately just kind of manipulate, in my opinion. So to answer your question specifically is, to Brian's point, he doesn't care. I can't care because mentally and as in my personal stance, it's not good for me to actually care and try to reach you. I just, Dr. King's daughter, she's Dr. Bernice King, put up a tweet recently and said that, yeah, we can disagree. She's seen, a lot of people are saying, why can't we just disagree and still be cordial? And her response was, we can disagree about like pizza toppings, but not racism, And so I think we're at that point right now where we're just like, we can't disagree about racism. There's no place for us to start right there. As long as you continue to manipulate division and manipulate different demographics against each other, and it's rooted in racism, and you continuously deny systemic racism and the historical meanings of slavery on our society, we have no common ground to even start on. And what I think this election showed us was that Democrats can actually win without trying to go and get what is it now, Brian, 55% of white women who the Democrats are so focused on going to get and turning over to the Democratic Party. And Stacey Abrams in Georgia has shown us, if you look at the map of Georgia, all of it being red, and then Atlanta and then other places, and showing us that there is still an opportunity to meet people and talk to people who say that decency matters, character matters, listening to other people, not picking on people for their disabilities, like just basic principles that we all learn in elementary school, I think there is still room for that. And so that's what it means for me right now, is that like we don't have to try to continue to appeal to people who have no desire to listen and learn from those who have experienced directly, um, racism and oppression. You don't have to try to convince them and change their mind. We need to continue to work on and expand the electorate and work with people who think the way or believe that we can hold in higher ideal. And that continues to be the message for the 4 million popular vote. Like only in America, I forget who tweeted, like, we are waiting to confirm the election where 4 million people have already made a decision, right? Like, so I think the popular vote continues to show the Democratic Party and continues to show people of goodwill that we are headed in a direction where we can continue to push the message that it should be on a moral high ground. And we don't have to spend so much time trying to convince those who are absolutely against the progress that our society deserves.
Thank you for that.
And like, yeah, and there's this election provided evidence for that strategy, right? Like two things. To your point about, the percentage of white people and white women who voted for Trump, right? Like Trump's overall election, more people voted for Trump this time around than they did in 2016, right? His margin with white women and with white men increased. So the efforts of like John Kasich in Ohio, the campaign made a huge deal about bringing him on, and, the whole conversation about talking across the aisle, the work of the Lincoln Project, whose entire idea is like, nation over party, and we're Republicans who are gonna work to get Trump out of office. All of those efforts, they did not, and this is not even they deserve to be dissed on like on a different thing, but like just a pure straight up evaluation of like, was this a good investment? No, it was not. It was not a good investment to try to get, to try to win the white suburban vote in Pennsylvania, right? Like that wasn't the good investment. The good investment was in the type of organizing and electoral work and GOTV work that resulted in the mail-in ballots that we were seeing in Philadelphia, or the votes that we were seeing in Georgia, or in Arizona, or Nevada, like that type of work in Minnesota and Michigan, like that. To your point, Reggie, like growing the electorate is what worked. Trying to win over moderates did not work, and actually it worked less this time around than it did in 2016.
And I think, Reggie, you hit on a really important point that I want to talk about, right? So this election was historic for a number of reasons, right? Granted, we have the oldest person to ever hold the office of presidency, but the vice president, our first woman, our first Black woman, our first woman of East Asian descent. What does that mean for the greater population? What does that mean for little Black girls that can look up and see that the person that holds the second highest office in our government is somebody that looks like them?
I'll keep it simple. What it means is that your people are going to hold you down. Honestly, for me, like what it means is that you can be yourself. You can go to that HBCU. You can you can be active and run for office and raise your political capital in a highly liberal city or state, if you will. You can be yourself and trust and rely on the people who look like you, the people who understand you, the people who care about what you have to say, that they will find a way to resonate with you, and that when it's your time, it's your time. And you should you should shoot your shot, essentially. And so for me, that's what it means for me. It's like I saw this post that said, hey, HBCU graduates, you can put your education at the top of your resume now. like like for the longest, and at least for me, like I was told when I first got to DC, if it ain't Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Ivy League, and you didn't graduate with a 4.0, put your education at the bottom, make them go look for that and look at all of your experience. And that's sad. That's terrible. I'll never again tell any graduate that ever again. But this means that you can, and this is something that people have been telling me for a while. I've just been like, the world ain't ready for that yet. But I just think that now it doesn't matter if the world is ready for it yet. If they're not, that's their loss. We are seeing someone who is completely capable, who is absolutely in position to be the best running mate for this president, or the VP for this president-elect. We're seeing that right now. And I have the ultimate confidence that over the next 4 years, regardless of what happens, that we know we have like this sister in the White House in his ear, and he's listening, and he has no choice, because the people who look like her, the people who believe in her, the people who are sensitive to voices like hers, they have spoken, and there's accountability there. So I would just say, yeah, that I think that you can be yourself, and you can trust that women of color, Black women, they are there. And I think that this is an example of, and it's the beginning of what that is supposed to look like.
Brian?
Yeah, I think, I know how I felt about Barack Obama's election, and about seeing somebody who looked like me. And I remember, I was 18 during when Obama was elected the first time. And I remember thinking, like, I never thought I would see this in my lifetime. And so I know that there are Black women who are watching the election now and saying, like, I never thought I would see this in my lifetime. And so, representation is important, and it does matter. And it's not everything, of course, but it is huge, especially when you've never seen that before. And so I also think that I think it is insufficient, but an important first step, and a nod by the Democratic Party about who's driving the success of the Democratic Party. I mean, you've got Ayanna Pressley, you've got Marge Fudge, you've got Barbara Lee, you've got Maxine Waters, you've got Stacey Abrams, you've got all these Black women who have been Black women voted against Trump at the highest rate of any demographic in both elections. And so, like, the success of the Democratic Party, both in terms of electoral success, in terms of policy success, and really overall messaging, is very much driven by Black women. And so I think, like, to have a Black woman then become vice president-elect is an extremely, like I said, insufficient, but overdue nod and acknowledgement of the work that, how important Black women have been for the party and for progressive policy at large.
And so that prompts me to my next question, right? This past year, more precisely the past 6 months, we have seen an onslaught on racial aggression, right? Like whether it's George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the multitude of other people, men and women, that the names that we know, the names that we don't know, that have been killed on camera, whether it be by police officers or so forth and so on. And so I guess my question is, we've seen what this current administration has done in regards to those situations, and frankly, it's been nothing. And so as a new president and new VP are coming in, as the new Senate is coming in, what as Black people can we look to our leaders in order to change what has become something of a constant trauma-filled void, circular void that we're continuously going in? So I guess my question is, what can we look towards our leaders, or what can we do to make sure that these things stop happening?
I'll let
Yeah,
I'll let Brian.
yeah. I don't know. I think this is an interesting question, considering, you know, thinking back to the primaries where both Harris and Biden were on policing issues, right? And so, you know, it's no surprise that, like, you know, they were center on issues of police reform, on issues of police abolition. So, you know, as a form, like, you know, because my background is in state policy, you know, my first thought to that, are that, you know, advocates are going to have to look to states and local municipalities to make that progress. I don't think that progress is going to happen at the national stage. With that said, the last administration was so bad that things will be better even if they're not progressive. And so an example of that is, you know, Trump created, and I think it was led by Bill Barr, you know, essentially it was a Blue Lives Matters commission. And effectively what it was a national commission to advance policies, local and federal policies that, you know, that punish protesters, that protect police from police misconduct, those types of things. So at a bare minimum, like, those things probably won't exist, right, in a Biden-Harris administration. In terms of progressive policy, though, I don't think we're going to see it. I think that, you know, one thing I'm really excited about is the LA County District Attorney race. George Garcon won that race. He beat the incumbent, who had a record of never prosecuting any police killings. So there's definitely, you know, and even during the summer, we saw city councils making huge strides in terms of either defunding the police or other major reform efforts. So yeah, I think that that's going to come at a local level. I think the best we can hope is that that's going to come at a state level. I think what we can hope out of this administration for federal policy in regards to policing is at least not the, you know, dog whistle that this current administration was sending. But I think that's about all we can expect.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think the chances at the federal level is going to be all messaging. It's all going to be positioning for the next election. It's going to be what the Democrats believe should happen. There's going to be a lot of reckoning inside of the Democratic Party with progressives. The whole defund versus reform movement, which I think is an absolutely necessary conversation that's healthy for the party. Unfortunately, everything that's healthy for the party isn't always helpful in winning elections, but it is a necessary conversation to have. I'm inspired, and I've asked myself the question, and, you know, ultimately also because, you know, I represent a corporate company that where we have a lot of companies or a lot of employees who want to know what they can do beyond just donating to bail, you know, bail projects and funding bail payments, right? Like, I think I've just been inspired by local, state level action that I can take police review boards to attending, you know, local meetings and city council meetings, to knowing who your sheriff is, to communicating with police officers who you see on an everyday basis. I just say basic community work that's necessary to build trust, and this, you know, I probably disagree with a lot of folks who are more progressive on, you know, defund and tear it down and let's start over again. I say build trust because I think it's necessary on both sides, for both the you know, those who are police officers and those who are a part of law enforcement, and then those who are seeking to reform law enforcement, that there has to be trust on both sides, and it just takes time to build that trust. Unfortunately, that time has run out in a lot of places, but I'm more encouraged to figure out what we can do at a local and state level, and I want to be more involved with my local uh, local representatives as well as our police force, and figure out how we can build community, because I think that at the state and local level, that's where it's going to happen. I get so frustrated at the federal level, looking at bills and reviewing bills and doing analysis to tell people which one do we want to get behind. Should we do a statement to support this bill? What's the likelihood that it could pass? And then the next day, somebody else and some other, unarmed black man, loses his life on the street, and it's videotaped, and it's like, here we go again, right? We missed this opportunity. And so I'm not saying that I give up on the federal level. I'm saying that the federal government and the House and the Senate have demonstrated to us their level of commitment and what actually can happen. And I'm just not encouraged by that at all, especially after George Floyd and everything that happened. You would think that there might be, if you look at the bills that were introduced in the House and the Senate, and you look at what's offered on the House bill and what's not offered on the Senate bill, you would think that there would be some process of coming to an agreement of at least 50% of the things that we've listed among all of us, that we can come to an agreement on. But we're not even close to that. We're like at 10 to 20% of the items that that they can agree on. And so I think there's a long way to go, and the next couple of years are going to be about messaging and less about actual results.
I think, yeah, when it comes to defund reform, right? Like there's a the and these are not the same movements, but the prison abolition and police abolition movement, and defund the police, those are, there's a lot of interconnectedness between those movements, and they're not new, but they have not been a part of public and kind of mainstream dialogue. Angela Davis for a long time has been writing about abolition. It's been a lot of people's work for decades now. It's just now reaching the kind of mainstream mainstream conversations. And so I think that there's a ton of like popular education is what we call it in advocacy. Like there's a lot of education to be done for the public on even what does the landscape of policy look like, and policy possibilities look like when it comes to the police, in policing. And so I think like that work is done, that work is always, no matter the issue area, that's always done at the local level. It's conversations about what does it look like if we were to actually eliminate our police force and replace it with something else like that. Those conversations always start on the local level, and then those learnings and examples kind of see themselves rise to state level and then federal policy over time. But even if they had the votes in Congress and they had a bill put together that defunded police nationally and replaced it with first responders and all these other great things, community people in communities, there's just not that baseline of understanding of what this actually means to actually be supported, right? Like people are scared, and so people are like, what do you mean you're going to take away the police? Like that work has not been done yet to make it a popular. It is, let me back up, it is a popular issue, I think, but people just don't understand necessarily what it possibly could look like in order for it to come from a federal policy at this point.
Thank you for that. And one thing, I want to make sure that I don't miss this. We are currently living through a pandemic. We've seen the numbers rise at a dramatical rate. We are one of the leading nations in both infected people and both deaths. And this current administration clearly did not care about it. So what can we look towards this new administration? I know Biden has talked about tomorrow he's setting out a task force to attack this pandemic. But Reggie, from your experience, what do you think that's going to look like, and how do we as individual citizens, individual Americans, work toward getting back to some sense of normality?
Well, first, we gotta define what normal is, and we have to figure out how to come to terms with that as Americans.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, as Americans, I have colleagues across the world who have been on lockdown for months and have come out of lockdown, have come out of, and when I say lockdown, I mean like they have to schedule times to go to the grocery store. Only a couple of people can go in. The bars, the restaurants are closed because they're trying to change the curve, like to lessen the curve so that the cases aren't up. And their elected officials and the people that they have chosen are able to make those decisions based off of data, based off of science, based off of research, and not so much just based off of rhetoric. And so, yeah, I just don't. I think the challenge for the Biden administration, the Biden Harris president and vice president elect administration is: are you willing to be unpopular and to enforce these rules in a very American society that is, and I'll just say it, tough. I'm a part of it as well. But if you've ever traveled, people think we're so arrogant.
Mm.
They think that we're so above any common sense or science, that we are just mainly interested in winning for our particular political party. And so it's not going to be popular for the president, because it's not even popular, the president elect. It's not even popular among Democrats to do what is absolutely necessary based on science and based on the medical advice of those who are close to this virus every single day. And everybody has their own stats and their own facts, if you will. I'm not even here to combat all of that. There are some who believe that we should just open up and our economy would do better, and everybody just probably needs to just catch it, and we need to focus on the vaccine. I'm not a professional in any of those regards. I'm just speaking to you as like somebody who is recently married, and I'm not as far along as both of you, but there's not a question in my mind that the number one priority here is to make sure we don't get it. I'm young, my wife is young, we could probably get it and still be good. You know what I'm saying? Like, and our parents are relatively young without a lot of health conditions. But that's not the point. The point is is that our government doesn't know enough about this and has been learning on the fly about this, that we need to do what's necessary in the short term to make sure that we can do what's necessary in the long term. So when you talk about getting back to normal, we have to put like this whole thing about getting back to normal. Like, I think the focus should be on, let's be healthy. Let's make the correct decisions for our family and our friends. Let's take away the guilt from those. And I recently got married and had people come to my wedding, and those who didn't come to our wedding, and we just made a decision to say, like, take away the guilt from those who said they wanted to just be safe and careful. Like, cool, do what you have to do for your family. I think that is where we need to focus more on, less on getting back to normal, right? And as much as I would love to go out with my wife and have everybody over for brunch and enjoy the young life in the city that we just began, like I more want to focus on making sure that we are healthy. So I think it's less about getting back to normal and more about how do we do the hard stuff right now in the next year. Let's be real, in the next year, to make sure that we can actually do and talk about being normal in 2 years.
So Brian, before you answer that question, I wanna add a little bit of caveat to that, Reggie. again, 70 million plus people voted for Donald Trump, right? So 70 million plus people felt like what he was doing is okay. In addition to, I would argue that in addition to a lot of the people that also voted for Joe Biden, there's some people that just fundamentally believe that I'm tired of being in the house. I'm tired of being on lockdown. I'm tired of being secure. So in my mind, the virus is over, even though we clearly know that's not true, right? We've even got to a point where wearing a mask is a politicized move, right? Like wearing a mask that could potentially save your life or save the life of somebody that you've lost or somebody that is older that might have some complications. So there's some people that fundamentally, as great as it sounds like, we just need to do X, Y, and Z, take a year, just focus on this, and it'll be all gone. There's some people that are not willing to do that. And so, Brian, to you, like, for how does this administration work on creating a mandate that's going to get us to a place where the numbers are going down? It's going to get us to a place where the deaths are going to go down and be unpopular in all while trying to create a sense of comfortability, a sense of we're doing this so our children can have a future. We're doing this so we can grow our economy and so forth and so on.
Yeah. So I think a couple things. One, polling largely shows that people, a significant majority of people believe that COVID was being mishandled, right? So, there are folk who voted for Donald Trump who strongly disapproved of his handling of COVID, who were very likely being more, were wearing masks and being precautious, if no other reason than just because they, because everybody else was doing it and they wanted to go to, the store or whatever, and they weren't going to be let in if they didn't wear a mask. So like, number one, I do think, American individualism and Americans' ideas of exceptionalism is pervasive and has helped to and has contributed to the fact that we have some of the worst COVID numbers. I do think that it's important to recognize, though, that like a majority of people do believe that we should be wearing masks, that we should be doing, some degree of social distancing, all these other things. I don't think that there's anything that the administration can do that's going to revert. Like things are bad. Things are going to continue to trend badly. There's nothing that the administration can do, whether it's a mandate or whatever, that's going to fix that. Of course there are things that, we can do to help to try to flatten I mean, we missed the window of opportunity. The window of opportunity was this summer, right? Like it's the bottle's kind of off, the cap is off the bottle. And at this point, we can continue to do the things that we know that we're supposed to do. I do think that like, I don't want to undervalue what it will mean to have somebody who's going to listen and follow the advice of public health officials. I think that will make a difference. I do think that it will save lives. But to your question of normalcy, one thing that, a lot of folks said towards the beginning of the pandemic, when I've really maintained course throughout, is that like the sense of normalcy, two things, and actually Dave Chappelle talked about it last night on SNL, right? Like normalcy, what is normal? Do we want to go back to normal? And can we go back to normal? We can't go back. Like, no, we cannot go back to normal. That's not happening. So we need to get rid of that. And then would we even want to go back to normal? And the answer to that largely is no as well. I think and there's a couple of things that are really key indicators of that for me and key examples of what we don't want to go back to. In this kind, so what happened in the early part of the 20th century was that there was a massive restructuring in what work looks like, right? And so we got workplace protections. We got things like the 40-hour work week. We got a minimum wage. We got unemployment insurance, right? Those things were a result of a massive economic downturn. what we realized was like, oh, if we don't have these safeguards, if we don't have these things, these tools in place, then we have zero ability to control the welfare of our people, right? That was nearly 100 years ago. And so it's actually time to revisit the question of is the way that our economy functioning, like, does it make sense? Does it make sense? Does a 40-hour work week still make sense? Does a 7.25 minimum wage still make sense? Does it make sense?
7.25? Is it still
nationally?
Nationally?
Right? Some states still have $2 minimum wages. The tip minimum wage is still something like $2 and some change. Does it make sense to have your health care tied to your employment? A majority of people get their health care through their employment. Does that make sense? Does it make sense to not have a nationwide leave policy, right? And so I think that, to the question of what do we have to do to get back to normal, I think the question is, what do we have to do in order to create the tools that we need for our economy to function as a 21st century economy? The reality is that people, and a lot of folk have realized this, 40 hours a week at your computer, like, you don't need that. That's not what productive means, right? Like, people are productive in different ways than they were 100 years ago. Likewise, the idea of a universal basic income makes much more sense now than it did 100 years ago. We're not producing, we're not having the same type of manufacturing, and we're doing a lot of service industry. And so it doesn't make sense for everyone to have to work a certain number of hours in order to pay a certain level of rent. Like, this economic model of work doesn't make sense. And so now is an opportunity for us to revisit it. And to ask ourselves, how can we actually put in some better safeguards so that we can have an economy that we want? So that's like my optimistic take on the pandemic and like what can come out of this administration. Do I think we're going to get a UBI? I don't know. Do I think we are going to advance at least the conversation about, living wage and tying so many key pieces of, like, what does it mean to survive to someone's work? Yeah, I think we're going to make progress in that regard. But I don't think we're gonna I think even after these 4 years, we're still gonna be in a little bit of pandemic mode.
Oh, man, first and foremost, I just want to thank you all so much for making time to speak with me tonight about this very important topic. And the last thing I just want to ask, and if you all can just, say a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, why, yes, Joe Biden has won this election. Yes, he's going to be the next president. But turning the Senate, and we have one runoff, and I think it's a potential of two runoffs in Georgia for to get the Senate majority. Can y'all talk a little bit about why that is so important? Because I think for the majority of people, they think that just because you elect a new president, everything changes in the favor of that person, not really understanding the different balances of power. And so can you all just talk a little bit about why it's so important to make sure that people are active in their local elections, make sure that we're fighting and working toward not only putting somebody in the executive branch, but also the Congress and the judicial branches of government. And Reggie, if you want to start with that.
Yeah, I mean, you already hinted to it, right? Like the Senate can already appoint federal judges and Supreme Court justices to the bench at the nomination of the President of the United States. And these are lifetime appointments. These are positions that will be here for a long time. And we saw over the past 4 years that the president got 3 Supreme Court judges, and he young 50-year-old people in these positions moving forward. And if it was not important, the Senate would not have taken the action that they've taken. I watched this week a clip called the Chicago 7 on Netflix. And I just could not believe that this this movie about the protest in Chicago after the Vietnam War, and how the protesters were tried on. They were tried. Like, I couldn't believe that this was real. Like, this was actual. The transcript, and of course, you know, there are some things that were exaggerated on, but I could not believe that most of this was a part of the transcript. And at the end of the movie, it showed that the judge who ruled over this case was ultimately deemed unprofessional and completely out of line in how he handled this case. That literally there was a person in his courtroom who was gagged and refused from being able to speak in an American courtroom. And like, all I would say to people who just, I know that our government, and I went to school, I got a political science degree, but I would just say, like, I really don't think you have to think so hard about this. You do not have to have a formal education in political science, history, public administration to understand what's going on. All you have to do is watch the tactics of those who are in power to see what is most important. And what has been most important to the Senate Republicans have been judicial confirmations. And the question you should ask yourself is why? Why are those most important? And all you need to do is compare the judicial nominations and confirmations of the Trump administration to the Obama administration. And you need to compare them on a front of yes, you need to compare them on demographics, you need to compare them on party, and you also need to compare them on philosophy and the way that they see the law. You can definitely compare them on those regards, and you will identify to yourself a pattern here. The fact that 2 weeks ago, the Trump administration confirmed another Supreme Court justice 2 weeks before he lost the election by how many popular votes? Right, like the fact that that was the case, you should be asking yourself the question. So I would just say that, like, I just think that they know how to win. And this is me as an operative talking, that the Republican Party knows how to win. They're focused on winning more than anything else. There are only a few things in my book as somebody who is really highly competitive that's more important than winning. And that's how you treat the poor. That's how you treat the least of these. That's how you govern. That's how you think about your moral responsibility to your brothers and sisters as humans. And I just don't think that that is a priority for the Republican administration. At least they haven't shown that that's a priority, in my opinion. So I would just say that, like, yeah, the reason it is so important, and what I am not ready for, and I'm not ready for Democrats, particularly Black men, to come and say what Joe Biden didn't do and have a complete misunderstanding of what he's capable of doing as an executive branch, as a president who doesn't have the Senate and who doesn't have, and only has the House. And so I just want to really, that's why I was so level-headed with this result, is because without the Senate, we're looking at a lot of executive action. And for the most part in our legal society, especially for Democrats who don't believe in just throwing stuff on the wall, I'm sorry, that's really partisan for me to say, especially for, you know, people who really like to do things based upon the law and only make decisions based upon what is legal and suitable for our democracy. It's really, really tough for you to just have the presidency and not have the Senate and then only have the House to back you up. So everything is about messaging, moving forward, writing letters, and having the most efficient executive action game that you can ever have. And I just think that that is something we have to get people used to and ready for. And I can already see it, that we are going to hear and see brothers and sisters who look like us saying that this administration didn't do absolutely anything for them after they put them in office. And I really just want to encourage everyone to look at all the positions that they circled on their ballot and keep those names in front of them, and to work each and every one of those names the way that they will work their what's the NFL draft, the fantasy football league. You literally need to work every single one of those names and think about every single person that you circled on that ballot, those you knew and didn't know. You need to literally think of them as your fantasy football league and say, like, you know, what is going to be the performance here? How can I keep up with them? How can I monitor the work that they're doing? So I'll stop there.
Brian, you want to close us off?
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things. Like, one, to Reggie's point about the power and importance of executive action. Yeah, not having the Senate is a big deal, obviously. And having thin margins in the House is a big deal as well, especially considering the fact that there's going to be I know House members just finished. They are terrified about 2022. They don't know nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what turnout's going to look like. And nobody really knows kind of what's going to be the rhetoric around that election. And so you've got House members, Democratic House members, who are scared. You've got what will likely be, I think, even with the two runoffs, they still actually, if they pick up two Democrats in Georgia, I think it's a tied Senate. But you're not going to have Senate. You're not going to have majority of the Senate. And so with that said, there are some really important things that the executive branch will be able to do that's going to make a huge difference in people's lives. There are some significant changes to the social safety net that Trump administration was able to do through executive orders. So, things like public charge, which effectively limits the legal ability of non-residents for their American children to receive things like school lunch, right? So, taking those policies day one, that can be taken away, things like that. Taking away Medicaid work requirements, things around housing, student loan forgiveness. There's a laundry list of things that is going to end up in Biden's 100 days that are going to be just extremely important first steps. A lot of those things are also important because once people get a taste of that progressive policy, it tends to be hard to take it away, even if they don't agree with it in the first place. And so I think that's one.
Healthcare being the best example of that, right?
Yeah,
ACA.
exactly. Yeah, they can't get rid of the ACA, right? Like Trump's the entire administration's conversation about pre-existing conditions had the ACA not passed, that would never even be he wouldn't have to defend pre-existing conditions, right? And so we're gonna have another opportunity to put some more of those kind of keystone policies into place. Now, I think what's difficult, or I'll frame it like this. I think what I'm excited about, and Reggie actually spoke to this, the last 4 years have been so bad that they have actually given us the space to examine the ways in which our republic works that we don't like. And so what I mean by that is that, anybody who takes 8th grade or 7th grade civics learns that we don't actually live in a direct democracy. We live in a representative democracy. We live in a republic. That's cool to learn in 8th grade. That has become very, very clear what that actually means. What minority rule looks like has been very clear in the past 4 years. What does it mean for an administration that did not receive the popular vote? What does it mean for the Senate right, which is fundamentally not representative body, right? What does it mean for the electoral college? What has made these last 4 years horrible are all the things that are components of a representational democracy as opposed to direct. And so one thing I'm excited about is that folk are pissed off about the electoral college. Excuse me. Folk are pissed off about the Senate, about the fact that North Dakota, no shade, gets the same amount of votes as California. People are pissed off about what's happening in the Supreme Court. I don't think Biden's going to pack the court, but I am excited about what judicial reform could look like. And so one thing I'm excited about, you asked about down ballot and all that sort of stuff. What I'm excited about is the fact that we're in a new space to really evaluate and critique our democracy at heart. And to ask the question of, does this system represent us the way that we want to be represented? Does it allow us to have the voice that we want to have? And what's exciting is that there are some very clear ways in which we can actually reform our democracy to make it more representative of what we actually want to see.
Yeah. No, one point I want to make to that point, man, is just, I would love to know, I know that there is the Democratic agenda that he ran on that had to be good for progressives, right, Brian? Like it had to be not too far against progressives, but it had to at least be, we're not going to pack the court. We're going to have a commission to study judicial, the judicial system, which I think was brilliant for the party. But I wonder, what are those 10 things that the administration thinks they can identify to work with the Mitt Romneys of the world and say, hey, Mitt, me as somebody who we can negotiate, we can talk about. We all know that daggone Mitch McConnell, and I wish I could afford to move to Kentucky and absolutely just work day in and night to get Mitch McConnell out. Either that or work on term limits in the Senate, right? I cannot, I think that is the most destructive place. But to your point, I just think that there is so much we could do if we could identify those areas where I really believe, based off of what you said about those who recently voted and the representative democracy, I really believe that there are some things, 5 to 10 things that we can identify that we can work on that we know might not win us the election in the next 4 years, but we know we can at least say we nailed in pre-existing conditions into healthcare. So no matter what the Republicans say, no matter what they run off of, it's got to be included. That's a win, regardless of what you call it, Obamacare or whatever. And it wasn't a win in 12? Did he do that the first 2010? Actually, that's what cost him the House in 2010. So it wasn't necessarily worth it then, but it took us 8 years for us to get pre-existing. Everything else is up outside, is up to debate, but at least we got pre-existing. So what are those little things that we could identify? I think those things will not make the papers. I don't think they're going to make the day-to-day agendas for a lot of people. But I do think Biden has in his mind, I need to call Mitt. I need to call, it's a couple of other senators who I can say, hey, here's something that I think we can work on together that will be helpful for everyday people. And that's why I voted for Biden. I'll say it because I just believe that he could listen to my uncles who work in factories, who receive piss poor Medicaid or healthcare. I think he could listen to them and demonstrate to them that he cares and that he will do something and that they have somebody who's actually listening to him, and he'll demonstrate the type of respect that they have to show up to their jobs with every day, right? Like they can't show up and like talk trash about everything and expect to have their job every day. They can't show up and not be prepared or be late or whatever. So that's what I would say. Like, so yeah, I think I love that point. I think that's an amazing point to talk about and end on here, is just like, what are those areas that we demonstrate and we're seeing that majority of Americans are saying right now that, you know, this is what's crazy. They voted for Republicans. like Republicans did really well this election. So I haven't seen the numbers and I don't have any evidence to prove this, but I think Republicans went to the polls and chose a different president and then voted down ballot everywhere else for their party. And I think that that's because that they said like, okay, look, enough is enough. We can still achieve a couple of things here and not have this level of like whatever represented at the highest levels. I think that that demonstrates that what we see on the media, what we see on the news is not reality. Like people are saying that we're not monolithic. We can make our own decisions. We can vote for particular individuals and still hold people accountable for issue areas that we care the most about.
First and foremost, brothers, thank you so much for having this conversation. Thank you so much for making time to do this. And for those viewing at home, I hope this episode served as a reflective point to you. I hope this served as a way to better understand a little bit about how government works, but how do we move forward from here? And for more up-to-date episodes and what we're doing here, Voices of Black Folk, please visit our website at voicesofblackfolk.com. And again, brothers, thank you so much and have a wonderful night.